My family laughed when my sister humiliated my little daughter at her twin's birthday party. She handed Lily a plain white paper bag while everyone stood around watching, smirking like they were all in on a cruel joke. Lily's small hands trembled as she opened it, her face lighting up with that fragile kind of hope only children have. Inside were a broken crayon, a used eraser, and a sticky note that said, "Try harder next year." The laughter that followed sliced through me like glass. My daughter's smile quivered, her chin tightening as she tried not to cry. I'll never forget that look. It was the same one I'd worn 100 times growing up in that same house. That desperate smile kids wear when they realize love is conditional. I stood there, holding back a lifetime of swallowed words. My sister, Cassandra, basked in the attention, her perfect hair and expensive dress shimmering under the party lights. My parents laughed along, acting like it was harmless fun. I realized then I'd been begging for scraps of their affection my whole life, hoping that maybe, through Lily, they'd finally see me, finally love me. But I was wrong. It wasn't just neglect. It was cruelty, inherited and passed down like family silver. We left quietly. I didn't make a scene. I just took Lily's small hand in mine and walked out of that glittering house of hypocrisy. In the car, she finally broke. "Mommy, did I do something bad?" she whispered. My throat tightened. I told her no, that she was perfect, and that sometimes grown-ups forgot what kindness meant. She fell asleep on my lap that night, her fingers still clutching the paper bag like it was proof of something I couldn't undo. But that night, something inside me shifted. I stopped crying and started planning. My husband, Marcus, didn't need words. He saw the look in my eyes and knew. We spent hours gathering proof, screenshots, receipts, messages. Cassandra's life looked perfect from the outside, but it was built on loans, favors, and lies we'd quietly helped her cover. We put everything into a black folder and tied it with a gold ribbon from one of her twins' old party gifts. It was poetic, really. At dawn, Marcus placed the folder on her pristine doorstep. We rang the bell and walked away. 10 minutes later, Cassandra's scream shattered the quiet street. The neighbor came running, then the police. They found her crumpled on the porch, the contents of the folder scattered. Unpaid debts, messages mocking me and my child, evidence of the support she'd hidden. She tried to spin it as harassment, but the truth didn't need defending. It spoke for itself. That morning, Lily woke up smiling. She didn't know the details, and she didn't have to. All she knew was that something dark had lifted. I watched her eat breakfast, humming softly, and realized this wasn't just revenge. It was the start of peace, the kind I'd been denied my whole life. Cassandra's mansion gleamed under the afternoon sun, every corner screaming wealth and precision. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, the lawn scattered with color-coordinated decorations that looked straight out of a magazine shoot. A golden arch framed the entrance, and a hired photographer clicked endlessly as guests arrived. The theme was royalty, and Cassandra, with her diamond-studded smile, played her part perfectly. The 5-tier cake shimmered under crystal chandeliers, each layer decorated with edible gold flakes. Her twins, Hunter and Skylar, stood on a raised platform wearing matching satin outfits, basking in the applause like miniature celebrities. Beside them, my daughter Lily clutched the small gift she'd wrapped herself, a simple hand-painted card and a friendship bracelet made from yarn. She wore her favorite blue dress and a crooked galaxy hair clip she'd made the night before. "Do you think they'll like it, Mommy?" she had asked me in the car, her voice full of hope. I'd smiled and said yes, praying that kindness still meant something in this family. But from the moment we walked in, I sensed the chill beneath the polished surface. Cassandra's eyes swept over Lily's handmade outfit and lingered a second too long. My mother, Brenda, adjusted her pearl necklace and whispered something to my father, Robert, who chuckled softly. They didn't need to say a word. I'd seen that look 1,000 times before. The quiet judgment wrapped in polite smiles. As gifts were opened, applause filled the room. Designer boxes, digital gadgets, luxury toys, each one a display of excess. When Lily stepped forward, the crowd went quiet for the first time. Cassandra took the small paper bag from her hand with exaggerated grace, her lips curving into a smirk that only I recognized. She reached in and pulled out a broken crayon, a used eraser, and a sticky note that said, "Try harder next year." The laughter came slowly at first, then spread like wildfire. My parents didn't flinch. My mother even clapped, as though it were part of the entertainment. Lily froze. Her eyes darted toward me, searching for permission to cry. But I couldn't move. My chest tightened, rage and disbelief colliding in silence. Cassandra's twins giggled, and someone from the crowd whispered, "How adorable." My sister's grin widened, soaking in the attention. In that moment, I saw it clearly. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was rehearsed. A performance meant to remind me that no matter how far I'd come, I was still the outsider. I took Lily's hand and led her away without a word. The laughter followed us down the hall, echoing against the marble floors. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a slap. Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" I wanted to scream that she'd done everything right, that it was the adults who were broken. But all I said was, "No, sweetheart. We just don't belong here." The ride home was quiet. Lily stared at the paper bag in her lap until she finally crumpled it into a ball. I watched her reflection in the rearview mirror, the same wounded expression I'd worn countless times as a child. I realized then that I'd brought her into the very world I'd spent years escaping. The glitter, the perfection, the applause, it was all poison disguised as love. And I silently vowed it would be the last time she ever breathed that air. The moment the mansion disappeared in the rearview mirror, memories I'd buried for decades began to surface like ghosts that refused to stay silent. Lily sat quietly beside me, clutching her stuffed unicorn, her little chest rising and falling unevenly. I could still hear the laughter echoing in my ears, not just from that day, but from years ago in different rooms over different humiliations. Every cruel smile, every dismissive comment, every subtle act of favoritism toward Cassandra folded itself neatly into one undeniable truth. This was never about one party. It was a continuation of the same script I'd been trapped in since childhood. I could see myself at Lily's age, standing by the kitchen door, holding my perfect attendance certificate, while my parents fawned over Cassandra's spelling bee ribbon. I remembered how my father had said, "She's the smart one, Hazel. You're the steady one. Every family needs both." Back then, I believed that meant I had a place. But steady was just another word for invisible. They never clapped for me. They never saw me. When I brought home my first report card with straight A's in high school, my mother barely looked up from folding laundry. "Your sister never got below an A+, she said, not unkindly, just factually, as if my effort existed only to highlight Cassandra's excellence. That's the thing about emotional neglect. It doesn't always come in screams. Sometimes it's the quiet indifference that teaches you your worth is conditional. I had spent my entire adult life trying to rewrite that story. I thought becoming a mother would give me a chance to build something different. When Lily was born, I wanted her to know what unconditional love felt like. But old wounds have a way of seeping into new generations. My parents reappeared with their smiles and gifts, and I mistook it for change. They called often, sent toys, attended birthdays, but the tone never shifted. When Lily showed her shyness, my mother said, "You were the same, always too sensitive." My father laughed and added, "She'll toughen up. You can't protect her from the world." It was their way of reminding me that empathy was a weakness, that softness was something to outgrow. I told myself they meant well, that maybe they didn't realize the damage they were doing. But after the birthday incident, there was no more pretending. I saw clearly what I had refused to see, that they didn't know how to love anyone who didn't serve their need for control. Cassandra thrived on being adored, and they fed her hunger because it mirrored their own. I was the shadow that made her shine brighter. That night, when I tucked Lily into bed, she asked if her grandparents were mad at her. The question broke something deep inside me. I sat there in the dark, holding her small hand, and understood that if I didn't stop this pattern, she'd inherit the same silence I grew up with. The kind that teaches you to smile through pain and apologize for existing. I promised myself it would end with me. There would be no more hoping for change from people who found comfort in my pain. This time, I would not ask them to see us. I would make us impossible to ignore, not with anger, but with distance. That night, the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic breathing of our sleeping daughter down the hall. The tension that had been building for years finally settled into a sharp, focused calm. Marcus sat across from me at the kitchen table, his face illuminated by the dim light above us. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. The decision was already made, not out of anger, but out of clarity. What happened at that party had only exposed what had always been true. They had taken too much for too long, and now it was time to show them what that cost. Marcus opened his laptop and began pulling up documents, and I joined him, scrolling through old emails, saved texts, and bank records. I'd forgotten how much of Cassandra's so-called success rested quietly on our shoulders. The down payment on her car, we had co-signed after her credit tanked from missed payments. The renovation loan on her kitchen, Marcus had covered the first installment when her business funds mysteriously vanished. Even her monthly rent supplement came from the account my parents thought we used for Lily's education. The irony burned. Cassandra had spent years mocking me for being too cautious, for not chasing wealth the way she did, yet her empire was built on my stability. As we compiled everything, I felt the old guilt start to creep in, that lingering sense of duty drilled into me since childhood. I'd been conditioned to fix, to forgive, to carry their chaos without complaint. But then I pictured Lily's face at the party, that trembling smile she'd forced as the laughter surrounded her. The guilt dissolved. This wasn't revenge born from bitterness. It was self-defense wrapped in strategy. Marcus looked up from the screen. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. His voice wasn't hesitant, just careful. I nodded. "They think I'll always choose peace over pride," I said. "They need to learn I'm not the same person they built their comfort on." We spent hours printing, labeling, and organizing. Every statement, every transaction, every message where Cassandra mocked us while benefiting from our help went into neat chronological order. I didn't realize how much power we held until I saw it laid out in front of me. Proof of how they'd used generosity as leverage while secretly despising the hands that fed them. By the time we were done, the first light of morning touched the edges of the curtains. Marcus reached for my hand, his expression softening. "You know, this isn't just about her," he said. "It's about breaking something bigger." He was right. Cassandra wasn't the only one who thrived off manipulation. She'd learned it from the best. My parents had built a hierarchy of loyalty where love was currency, and Cassandra was the highest bidder. But now the balance was shifting. We gathered the documents into a black folder, sealed it shut, and placed it on the counter. The plan wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The power of truth, when presented with outrage, has a way of detonating all on its own. We didn't go to bed that night. We just sat together in the quiet, waiting for dawn, not in dread but in readiness. The calm before the storm didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom approaching. By the time the clock struck 4, the dining table had vanished beneath neat stacks of paper, every sheet a fragment of truth they had conveniently ignored. Marcus organized each document with the precision of a surgeon, while I double-checked every date and message thread, ensuring nothing was exaggerated or taken out of context. This wasn't about vengeance fueled by impulse. It was about finally revealing what had always been hidden behind their masks of civility and superiority. We called it the reckoning, not out loud, but with an unspoken understanding that this was the moment their carefully constructed world would begin to crumble under its own weight. The black folio sat at the center of the table, sleek and silent, holding years of hypocrisy between its covers. Inside were my mother's emails describing Lily as emotionally demanding and suggesting we were coddling her instead of toughening her up. There were text messages from Cassandra to her friends, photos of my modest home captioned with mocking remarks about how Hazel still lives like a charity case. And then there were the financial statements, cold and undeniable, detailing every transfer, every check, every quiet rescue we'd extended to keep Cassandra's life polished and untarnished in the eyes of others. As I slid the final page into place, I felt something strange, not satisfaction, not even anger. It was release. The truth had always been my burden. Now it would be theirs. Marcus found a gold ribbon in one of the drawers, a leftover from the twins' last birthday party, and tied it neatly around the folder. The irony was exquisite. The same symbol of celebration that once mocked my child would now deliver a reckoning none of them could laugh away. We didn't add commentary, no vindictive notes or accusations. The documents spoke for themselves. We didn't need to manipulate the narrative. The facts were enough to undo their facades. Every page carried the weight of their own words, their own choices, their own disregard. What made it powerful wasn't its cruelty, but its simplicity. Marcus looked at the folder and exhaled. "This isn't revenge," he murmured. "It's balance." He was right. They'd built their illusion of power on the assumption that I'd never challenge them, that my silence equaled submission. But silence only lasts until the truth finds its voice. I placed my hand on the folder, feeling the faint texture of the ribbon beneath my fingers. "They always wanted control," I said softly. "Let's give them something they can't manage, accountability." It wasn't about destroying their reputation or seeking validation from anyone. It was about returning their actions to them exactly as they were, stripped of pretense. The house was still as the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner, almost sacred. I realized that power doesn't always come from confrontation or chaos. Sometimes it's found in the quiet confidence of knowing you've stopped allowing people to rewrite your pain into their comfort. We placed the folder by the door, ready for morning. No dramatic speeches, no tears. Just the calm certainty that truth, when finally unburied, has its own gravity, and once it starts to fall, nothing can stop its impact. The morning air was cool and heavy with that strange stillness that hangs before something irreversible happens. Marcus pulled the car to the curb outside Cassandra's house, its white facade gleaming under the pale sunrise like a mask hiding rot. Without a word, he stepped out, placed the black folio carefully on her doormat, and rang the bell once, short, deliberate, final. Then he walked back to the car, his expression unreadable. We didn't speed away or look back immediately. We just sat for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the engine, waiting for the sound we both knew was coming. It didn't take long. A piercing scream ripped through the calm morning, sharp and ragged, the kind that doesn't come from fear alone but from realization. The sound of someone seeing the scaffolding of their perfect life collapse. Marcus didn't flinch. I stared ahead, the sun glinting off the rearview mirror, and felt no triumph, only a quiet confirmation that the balance had shifted. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was clean. Within minutes, the neighborhood began to stir. Curtains fluttered, doors opened, and the whispers began to spread through the manicured lawns of Cassandra's suburban paradise. Her voice carried across the street, furious, desperate, shrill. I could imagine her standing in that doorway, clutching the folder like a venomous thing, her composure fracturing with every page she turned. By the time we reached the corner, police lights flashed faintly in the distance. The neighbor, a nosy woman who thrived on gossip, must have called them after hearing the commotion. Marcus slowed the car, and through the side mirror, we caught a glimpse of two officers speaking to Cassandra. She gestured wildly toward the folder, her words coming fast, sharp, and incoherent. One officer bent down, flipped through the documents, and then straightened up, calm and detached. His expression didn't change. He simply handed the papers back and said something brief before returning to the car. Cassandra's outrage melted into a visible panic. She had expected pity. Instead, she got procedure. We didn't need to hear what was said to know the outcome. The officers wouldn't see a crime. They would see a stack of truths, unpleasant, personal, but lawful. For the first time, Cassandra had to face a reality she couldn't control or charm her way out of. No one was protecting her now, not even the illusion of respectability she'd spent her whole life crafting. As we turned onto the main road, Marcus reached for my hand. "It's done," he said simply. I nodded, though the word didn't feel like closure yet. It felt like the quiet before an aftershock. I could already sense the next wave coming. The messages, the calls, the manipulation disguised as reconciliation. But for now, there was stillness. The world outside our window looked ordinary. Joggers, school buses, morning routines resuming. Yet everything felt different. The truth had been delivered, and whether they accepted it or denied it, it would live with them now. Cassandra's scream wasn't just the sound of consequences. It was the sound of exposure, the first crack in the walls they'd built to hide behind. And though I didn't smile, a weight I'd carried since childhood finally began to lift. By mid-morning, the silence we'd savored was gone. My phone vibrated so violently it nearly slid off the counter. Cassandra's name filled the screen again and again, her messages flipping from one extreme to another. Pure venom to pitiful pleading, rage dissolving into desperation. The first one read like a scream typed in capital letters, full of accusations and profanity. Minutes later, she tried a softer tone, invoking sisterhood, pretending confusion, asking, "Why would you do this to me?" As if the years of humiliation, manipulation, and cruelty were figments of my imagination. Marcus glanced at the notifications piling up, his jaw tightening, but we both knew better than to answer. Then my mother's number flashed. I didn't pick up, but her voicemail arrived moments later. Her voice was calm, rehearsed, carrying that same polished tone she'd used my whole life when pretending to mediate conflict she'd secretly enjoyed. "Hazel," she began, "I don't know what's gotten into you, but you've gone too far. Cassandra is in tears. You've destroyed this family over a misunderstanding, a child's mistake, for heaven's sake." I could almost hear her sipping coffee as she spoke, as though betrayal could be smoothed over with tone and phrasing. What she didn't realize was that this time, I wasn't a child desperate for her approval. Marcus sat at the dining table, laptop open, scrolling through the extended family group thread, one my parents had long used to parade Cassandra's accomplishments. It was time the same space held a different kind of truth. With quiet precision, he attached the digital version of the folder and typed 2 words as the subject line. For context. Nothing more. No explanations, no justifications. The files spoke for themselves. Within minutes, the read receipts started appearing, one after another. The first call came from Aunt Marianne, the one relative who'd always kept her distance from family drama. Her voice trembled slightly when she said, "Hazel, I knew something was wrong all these years. I just didn't know how deep it went." Then another text followed from my cousin Amy. "Your mom and Cass made you out to be unstable. Seeing this, it changes everything." The ripple effect was instant. The unspoken hierarchy that had defined our family gatherings began to dissolve, replaced by silence and confusion. The flawless image my parents had curated, devoted parents, perfect daughters, was cracking for everyone to see. Cassandra's tone shifted as the day went on. She began sending screenshots of her own, trying to twist the narrative, cherry-picking lines to paint herself as the victim. But for every half-truth she spread, there was documentation waiting to contradict it. The more she fought, the more tangled she became in her own lies. By evening, she'd stopped messaging entirely. Even her social media, once flooded with curated perfection, went dark. When night fell, my phone buzzed one last time, this time from my father. The message was short. "You didn't have to humiliate us." No anger, just a hollow acknowledgement of loss. I read it twice before setting the phone down. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. What they called humiliation was simply truth stripped of their control. The facade had been dismantled, and though the silence that followed was heavy, it was the kind that signals an ending. The kind that leaves space for something cleaner to begin. When the first week of fallout settled into uneasy quiet, I almost believed Cassandra had finally realized she'd lost. Her messages stopped, her posts vanished, and the house across town, the one she bragged about endlessly, had gone dark. But peace in my family had never been anything more than an intermission between storms. It was a Thursday when the school called. The voice on the other end was calm but cautious. "Mrs. Daniels," the secretary began, "your sister dropped by this afternoon. Said she was bringing Lily her lunch." My stomach turned cold. I hadn't packed anything for Lily to forget. Cassandra had always been clever enough to know how to slip through cracks, especially when she wanted to perform kindness under the guise of care. I raced to the school, but she was already gone. When I found Lily in the classroom, she sat at her desk clutching a folded piece of pink paper. Her eyes were red, her smile trembling the way it had at that birthday party. "She said she misses me," she whispered, "and that you're the reason she can't see Grandma." I unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakable, Cassandra's perfect curls of ink looping around a message that made my skin crawl. "Your mom is keeping us apart. I still love you." The paper smelled faintly of her perfume. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. That evening, Lily barely touched her dinner. Marcus tried to coax her to eat, but she kept staring at the note. When she finally looked up, her voice was small, confused. "Mommy, why would Aunt Cassandra say you're lying?" There was no hesitation this time. No weighing of family ties or second chances. Just a cold, fierce clarity. Cassandra hadn't just violated my trust. She'd tried to infect my daughter's mind with the same poison she once used on me. Marcus didn't speak at first. He simply walked to his desk and opened the folder labeled legal. We had anticipated this escalation, though I'd prayed it wouldn't come to it. He pulled out the contact information for our attorney, the same one who'd helped us secure the paperwork documenting Cassandra's debts. The decision was mutual, wordless. The line had been crossed. The next morning, I stood in the courthouse lobby holding the formal petition. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as I read each clause aloud before signing. "Temporary restraining order," the clerk confirmed, stamping it with deliberate finality. Cassandra's name, printed neatly beside mine, looked smaller than I remembered. Less powerful. Just another person with boundaries she'd finally be forced to respect. When the papers were served later that afternoon, her reaction was predictable. A flurry of angry texts about betrayal, about turning family into enemies. I didn't answer. Marcus deleted them without hesitation. For once, silence wasn't submission. It was defense. That night, as Lily drifted to sleep beside her stuffed unicorn, I sat by the window watching the rain trace patterns down the glass. For years, I had been the one reaching out, begging for peace, clinging to the illusion that blood meant safety. But now, for the first time, I understood that peace doesn't come from forgiveness when the wound keeps reopening. It comes from the final line, the one you draw and never let anyone cross again. Peace didn't arrive like a sunrise. It crept in slowly, hesitant and unsure. The first few mornings after the court order felt unreal. I woke expecting chaos, calls, messages, some new way Cassandra might twist things, but there was nothing. The silence felt foreign at first, almost too clean. But as the days passed, that quiet began to feel like air we hadn't realized we'd been gasping for. The tension that had once lived inside our walls started to dissolve, leaving behind something soft, unfamiliar, and safe. Lily began to change before my eyes. Her shoulders, once curled in defense, loosened. The dark circles under her eyes faded. She started humming while brushing her teeth, a small sound that broke me in the best way. She still had moments, flinches when the phone rang or when someone mentioned family. But those moments didn't define her anymore. Her laughter returned, light and unguarded. The child I thought I might never see again began to bloom in her own quiet way. One afternoon, she came home clutching a crayon drawing of two girls standing under a swirl of purple stars. "That's me and Maya," she said shyly, referring to her new friend from school. "She doesn't think I'm weird when I like quiet." I hung that drawing on the fridge next to her galaxy sketches. It wasn't just art, it was proof that healing had roots. Marcus adjusted too, though his recovery looked different. He poured his energy into home projects, fixing things that didn't really need fixing, like he was rebuilding what safety meant. Sometimes I'd find him sitting on the porch, staring at the trees, lost in thought. We didn't need to talk about Cassandra anymore. Her name carried no power here. He once said, "You know, Hazel, peace feels strange when you've lived your life waiting for noise." I understood completely. I learned to stop checking my phone for updates or waiting for the next emotional ambush. I deleted old texts, emails, photos, every trace of that chapter. It wasn't about pretending it hadn't happened. It was about refusing to keep it alive. Even my parents' silence became a gift in disguise. The absence of their voices, once something that wounded me, now brought calm. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. The family I had was right here, around our dinner table, laughing over burnt pancakes and silly jokes. The house itself seemed to breathe differently. Lily's laughter filled corners that used to echo with arguments. Evenings were gentle again, books, tea, her small hands tracing constellations on paper. I realized one night, watching her sleep, that I'd stopped bracing for pain. That was the true marker of peace. Not that everything was perfect, but that nothing was unpredictable. The quiet road wasn't lonely. It was steady. It was honest. It gave space for forgiveness, not for them, but for myself, for ever believing I had to earn their love. Now, I only needed to protect the peace we built. And that finally was enough. The school's gym was filled with paintings and crafts hung on strings, the faint smell of acrylics and glue mixing with laughter and camera clicks. I walked beside Lily as she searched the rows, her small hand holding mine with a quiet confidence that hadn't existed months ago. When we found her piece, my breath caught. Against a dark blue backdrop filled with swirling silver stars, she'd painted a small figure floating among them, smiling. In the corner, she had written, in uneven glitter glue letters, "Safe is better than big." For a long moment, I couldn't move. Those 5 words carried more truth than any speech I could give her. They were the echo of every sleepless night, every quiet decision, every boundary rebuilt. She hadn't just processed what happened, she had transformed it into her own truth. While other parents snapped pictures of bright suns and stick-figure families, I stood still, realizing what freedom looked like through the eyes of a child who had survived cruelty and found peace instead. Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Do you like it, Mommy?" she asked softly. My throat tightened. "It's perfect," I said, but what I meant was, "You're perfect." That painting wasn't just art. It was the proof that she no longer carried fear, that she understood something most adults never learn. Safety is worth more than approval, more than appearances, more than being liked by the wrong people. Marcus joined us, his smile steady, proud. He bent down, brushing Lily's hair from her face. "You did good, star girl," he whispered. She giggled, beaming in that unguarded way I hadn't seen in so long. Around us, the crowd blurred into background noise. For the first time, our family wasn't defined by what we'd survived, but by what we'd chosen. Peace over performance, love over loyalty to pain. Later that evening, after Lily fell asleep, I sat by the window scrolling through my inbox. Among the mundane updates was a new message. The sender's name made my stomach tighten for just a second, Cassandra. The subject line read, "Are you happy now?" I opened it. One short sentence sat alone, "You won." I stared at it, waiting for something to rise, anger, guilt, anything. But there was nothing left. I simply hit delete and closed the laptop. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was powerful. I turned off the lights and looked toward Lily's room. The glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck to her ceiling shimmered faintly through the crack in the door. That small universe she painted was now mirrored above her bed, tiny, steady lights in the darkness. And in that stillness, I understood something deeper than victory. I hadn't conquered my family. I had freed myself from them. Breaking the pattern wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet revolution built on boundaries, love, and truth. We didn't win. We simply became whole. And as I stood there watching those faint stars, I knew this was the legacy I wanted her to keep. Not survival, but peace. Not power, but freedom. Because she was right, safe really is better than big. Do you think I did the right thing by cutting Cassandra and my parents out of our lives? Or should I have tried to make peace for Lily's sake? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on choosing boundaries over family loyalty. Share your opinions in the comments. I'd love to read them and discuss. If you want more real-life stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.